Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. Now I show wet blending on a lot of my videos but in a very short space of time. So I thought I'd take a little bit longer to show how I do wet blending using this Rotigus model as an example. The staff is going to be wet blending with contrast paints from a green to a kind of brown, and the tentacles are using normal paints from a dark pink to a light pink. So let's kind of get into it. So it's not as scary as you think. Now I am no expert. I do very simple techniques and it gets fairly close to what I think the experts kind of do. Now if using contrast paint, a tip I would give is pick your light colour first. So I'm taking this green plague bearer flesh colour, putting it onto the tips of the staff here, putting it on into a good thick layer, and I'm only working on one side at once because you don't want this paint to dry, and it does dry fairly quick. Now I'm taking a brown, taking a wildwood colour, and if you notice I'm putting it a little bit of a distance away from the green, so there's a bit of white in between when you're painting it. Getting it on really well and then moving that up into the green. That's just how I've found contrast paints mix together quite nicely and quite well. So we're going into the margins of where the green was and the brown, but also once I've touched the green with the brush, I'm then taking it and just tipping it on the very ends of the green as well. So it kind of merges the green and brown, not just on the join line, but you can drop some of that brown like on the tips of the brown, etc. So that makes sense. You see here doing the same thing, putting a tiny bit of green on the very end, and smearing it in, and that's it. That's wet blending. Super simple. Sounds really complicated, but it is not. That is it. Now, working on normal paints, it's slightly trickier because normal paints don't want to mix quite as easily. So when you're doing it, I've got these on a wet palette, so they're a little bit watery, so they mix together well, but following the same principle. I'm not doing, you can see here, both sides of the tentacle. I'm getting it to the point of, got a good coverage, and you know it's going to remain wet for this next stage. Now the next stage, so I've done it from Screamer Pink, and then I'm using a Racar Flesh. The next stage, I'm then just putting that Racar Flesh directly onto the end of the pink, spreading it out. You can see here it pales down that pink quite dramatically, and there's almost 2 or 3 kind of different pink colours here. Cleaning the brush again, going into the Racar Flesh, and then putting the Racar Flesh at the bottom of the lighter pink colour we've got. Again, moving that around the tentacle and making those sort of different colours. And then once you've got to the stage you're happy with this kind of third area, back into the water, clean your brush, back into Racar Flesh, and do the final stage of the tentacles you'll see here. And then you can play at any point and you can go straight back and you can put some darker pink on at the very end if you think you've lightened it up too much and merge around. And that's it. That in a nutshell is wet blending. Now there are a million other techniques you could play with. There's lots of other different ways of doing it from painters that are far, far better than I am. But in a nutshell, that is all you are doing. Taking 2 colours. Wouldn't ever do it with more personally. I know you can do, but 2 colours, a lighter and a darker colour. And I tend to, on contrast paints you've seen before, put the light colour on first and merge the dark colour into it, because that definitely works for contrast paints. With standard paints, I tend to do it the other way. I tend to put the dark colour on first and merge the pale colour into it, because I personally find that easier. Now, it does work both ways as well. You know, you can start with the light colour. You see here, just going back a bit, I'm taking the Racar Flesh and making the very end of the tentacle quite pale. You can take the light colour and start adding sort of dark colour into it, but I do find it personally easier this way around. So contrast paints one way, the sort of standard paints this way. Now I will kind of ruin this contrast or this wet blending down the end of the tentacle by slamming some wash on it, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So on the final effect, it's not as stark as it looks like on here, but when you actually see the model in the flesh, you will see those things. So this is what it looks like once the contrast paint are dried. You'll see here in the middle of the staff, I've done that wet blending with putting some green on the actual face of the staff and worked into it in brown. And you can do that kind of anywhere along the whole model. You could use that on the rises and ridges. I've done a lot of contrast paint blending in my Hero Quest series, especially around with the knights, where I've done some bone and black blending and some red and black blending. So it can be done with any colour on any model, and really I'd encourage you to experiment, because that's where the fun of the wargaming hobby lies. It's not a scary technique as people seem to make out. Now, a couple of caveats I would say: try and stick to complementary colours when you're doing it, because it definitely works better. But again, some really wild, vivid colours might be exactly what you're going for in your army, and always experiment on either spare old models, bits of sprue, those kind of things, before you jump into doing it on something like a Rotigus Great and Clean one for 100 quid. So, but just have fun with it. See there, the final effect. This is after the wash. Not quite a finished model. The finished model will be being featured in a video next week. So I hope you did enjoy that. I hope you just have a go at wet blending, have fun and experiment with your models. If you liked that, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all again.